My wife cheated on me with her boss, and now she's trying to steal our $500, $0 house and $200, $0 in savings. She's even hired a lawyer to fight me over custody of our kids, but I just found out she's been secretly funneling money into her lover's offshore account for years. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this story about how everything I worked for was falling apart because my wife, Emily, turned out to be the biggest liar and cheat I've ever known. The craziest part, I caught her red-handed, and it was more than just some late nights or flirtatious texts. It was a full-blown affair with her boss, Mark. And the worst part, she's been sneaking around with him for years, funneling our family's hard-earned money into offshore accounts to support their secret life. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I believed in us. We had a beautiful house, worth about $500, and a decent amount of savings, around $200. I thought we had a good future ahead, especially with my stable job as an engineer. Emily was supposed to be the loving mother of our two kids, Sarah and Jake. We had plans, dreams, a life I thought was built on honesty. But all that was shattered when I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop. It all started a few weeks ago. I noticed Emily acting strangely. She'd come home late, always with a tired excuse about work. She'd delete texts on her phone before I could see them. Her behavior was off, but I figured she was just stressed or maybe having an affair with a coworker. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was just paranoid. But then I got suspicious enough to dig a little deeper. One night I was working late myself, and Emily had already gone to bed. I decided to check her phone. I'd never gone through her stuff before, but I had this gut feeling. I unlocked her phone, and that's when I saw the messages. They weren't just friendly texts, they were flirty, intimate, and downright disgusting. She was calling Mark babe, sending him selfies, talking about how much she missed him when she was away. The kind of stuff you don't say to your boss unless you're crossing a line. What really made my blood boil was the last message I saw. Can't wait to see you tonight. Let's make it special. My hands trembled. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to process how my wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was cheating on me with her boss, Mark, who was twice her age and already married with kids of his own. I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't want to do it immediately. I needed more proof. So I started digging into her bank accounts, her emails, and her social media. That's when I found the real bombshell. Over the past few years, Emily had been funneling money into some offshore account, something I never knew about. Thousands of dollars every month, disappearing into some shell company in the Caribbean. I traced it back to her, and it all pointed to her. Hiding money from me, probably to support her affair and their lifestyle. That's when I realized this was bigger than just some affair. It was about betrayal on every level, emotional, financial, and moral. I felt sick. My mind raced with questions. How long had she been lying? Was my entire marriage a lie? Did she ever love me? I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. The house we built, the life I thought we had, was it all just a facade? I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The next day I knew I had to confront her. I sat her down after the kids went to bed. Her face was already defensive, like she knew I'd found out. I laid out the evidence, the texts, the bank statements, the offshore account. Her face twisted into a sneer and she started lying right away. "You're overreacting," she said, rolling her eyes. "Mark's just a friend, you're insecure, you don't trust me." But I had the proof. I knew she was lying, and I could see the guilt in her eyes, even if she tried to cover it up. The confrontation was intense. She yelled, called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her. She insisted she never cheated, just worked late, and that I was imagining things, but I knew better. I saw her texts, her secret money, her lies. It was like watching a perfect storm of betrayal unfold in front of me. My mind was racing, trying to process how my wife could do this to me, how she could lie so effortlessly, and how she thought she could get away with it. I felt so many things: anger, heartbreak, disgust. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her. But I also felt a strange numbness settle in. I'd lost my wife, my trust, my sense of security. The house we fought so hard to buy, the kids' future, everything was suddenly uncertain. I kept telling myself I had to be strong, that I'd figure out what to do next. But inside I was just devastated. How could she do this? How could she betray me, our family, and everything we built for a piece of ass and some secret cash? It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. The house felt like a prison, filled with her lies and my shattered trust. I kept replaying the moment I confronted her, the way her face twisted when I laid out the evidence, how quickly she turned from smug to defensive. It was like I had uncovered a side of her I never knew existed. She kept insisting she loved me, that Mark was just a fling, a mistake she'd stop. But her words sounded hollow, like she was just trying to save her ass. I knew better. The texts, the offshore accounts, the way she'd been sneaking around for years, it all pointed to something much bigger. And that's when I started digging into her financial stuff more seriously. I found her emails. She'd been communicating with Mark not just at work but outside of it, late at night in secret. She'd even set up a fake email account just to hide her correspondence. I was furious, but part of me was also deeply hurt. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she betray everything we built? I felt like I was living in someone else's life, watching from afar as my wife turned into someone I didn't recognize. The offshore account was the key piece. I traced it through some shady financial services. The amount of money she'd been funneling out was staggering, close to 100 grand over the past few years, all hidden in some shell company in the Cayman Islands. I couldn't believe I'd been paying her bills, trusting her with our savings, while she was secretly supporting her affair and hiding money from me. It was like I'd been played for a fool. I started to piece it all together. She was lying about her job, about her late nights, about her spending. She'd been funneling money into that offshore account, probably to support her lover's lifestyle. I found receipts for trips she took with Mark, expensive dinners, hotel stays, all paid for with our money. And she had the nerve to act innocent when I confronted her. I saw her switch into full-blown denial mode, claiming she was just stressed or that I was paranoid. But I knew the truth. I could see it in her eyes, in her lies. The next day, I decided I had enough. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal, and I needed to make a plan. I called a lawyer, set up a meeting. I knew I had to protect our assets, our house, and our kids. She was already preparing to fight me over custody, hearing her own lawyer. She'd even threatened to take everything from me, claiming I was an unfit father because I was controlling and paranoid. She was good at lying, but I had the evidence now, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I also discovered something else that made my blood boil. She'd been secretly transferring money into her lover's offshore account for years. I found bank statements showing regular deposits, sometimes thousands at a time. She'd been hiding her affair and her money all along, right under my nose. I felt so betrayed, so stupid for not seeing it sooner. How many other lies had she told? How long had this been going on? All these revelations hit me like a freight train. I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been lying to me every step of the way. I started to question everything: our marriage, our future, her love. Part of me wanted to tear everything down, to fight her for everything she tried to steal, including our house and savings. But another part just wanted to run away, to disappear and forget this nightmare ever happened. That's when I realized I had to be strategic. I couldn't just blow everything up in a fit of rage. I had to protect what was mine, legally and financially. I had to figure out how to get my hands on the money she'd been hiding, and how to stop her from taking our house or fighting me over custody of the kids. I knew she was planning to do everything she could to keep control, but I was determined not to let her win. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could: screenshots of texts, bank statements, emails, even her secret social media accounts. I wanted everything in case I needed to fight her in court. I also reached out to a private investigator I knew, someone who could verify her trips and her meetings with Mark. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep her deception went. She wasn't just cheating, she was actively planning to take everything from me, using her affair and her lies as leverage. I felt like I was in a war I didn't want to fight, but I had no choice. I had to protect myself, my kids, and what little was left of the life I thought I had. I was angry, betrayed, and exhausted. But I also knew I had to stay calm, play it smart, and prepare for the battle ahead. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not after what she'd done. The next step was legal action, and I was ready for it. The day I met with my lawyer, everything became real in a way I hadn't fully faced before. Sitting across from her, I laid out all the evidence, screenshots of the texts, the offshore bank statements, the emails where Emily was clearly lying about her whereabouts. I saw her eyes narrow as she looked through the documents, and I could tell she was already formulating a plan. My lawyer, Sarah, is sharp. She's handled cases like this before, and she immediately pointed out how much Emily had been hiding. She explained that I had a strong case, especially with the proof of the offshore accounts and the financial deception. She told me I needed to be prepared for a fight, especially because Emily was already hiring her own lawyer to contest custody and try to claim our house. That's when I realized how far she was willing to go to keep her secrets and her new life with Mark. I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. How did it get to this point? I used to think we had a good marriage. I was the guy who worked hard every day, paid the bills, and trusted her to do the same. And now, I was about to go into a legal war over my family, my assets, and the woman I thought was my partner. I couldn't help but think about all the nights I stayed up worrying about our future, only to find out she'd been planning her escape, hiding money, and sleeping with her boss. Over the next few days, I started to take control. I froze her access to our joint accounts, which she was furious about. She threw a tantrum, calling me controlling and paranoid, but I didn't care. I knew the truth now, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I also hired a private investigator just as I'd planned to keep tabs on her movements. The investigator confirmed what I'd suspected. She was still seeing Mark, traveling to meet him, and spending money like there was no tomorrow. It was infuriating to see her betray me and our kids so blatantly. Meanwhile, Emily was making her moves. She hired her own lawyer, obviously planning to fight me for custody and the house. She accused me of abandoning her and being paranoid, trying to paint me as the bad guy. She even tried to spin her affair as just a mistake, claiming she loved me but was weak and confused. Yeah, right. I wasn't buying her crap anymore. I knew her game now. She was trying to manipulate the courts with lies, but I had the evidence to back me up. The most shocking part was when she started to threaten me outright. She said if I went after her for the money or custody, she'd destroy me. She claimed she'd tell everyone I was an unfit father, that I was abusive or controlling, things I knew weren't true. Her lawyer even suggested that. She'd accuse me of financial irresponsibility, trying to turn the tables. I was furious. How could she be so calculating, so ruthless? It was like she'd planned this whole thing for months, maybe years. I realized I had to act fast, not just legally but emotionally. I couldn't let her keep gaslighting me or making me doubt myself. I had to stay focused, gather more proof, and prepare for the worst. I started documenting everything: her secret trips, her secret conversations, her attempts to hide assets. I also reached out to some friends and family, telling them what was happening. I needed a support system, even if I felt like I was fighting this alone. One night, I found her trying to transfer more money into her offshore account. I caught her just in time. I confronted her and her face went pale. She lied, of course, saying she was just saving for the kids' future, that it was nothing to worry about. But I knew better. I had the proof and I was ready to expose her. I told her I was done playing her games, that I'd fight her every step of the way. That was the night. I decided I'd do whatever it took to get my life back. I also started to think about the house. It was the biggest asset we had, and I knew she was planning to try and steal it from me. I hired a real estate appraiser to get an independent valuation, just in case she tried to claim I was trying to cheat her out of her rights. I didn't want to be the bad guy, but I also wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation to her advantage. I was committed to protecting what was mine no matter what. The emotional toll was heavy. Every day I felt more exhausted, more betrayed. I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach, wondering what fresh lie she'd come up with next. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't fix this marriage, at least not with her anymore. My focus shifted to protecting my kids and my assets. I realized I had been naive, trusting her blindly for so long, and now I had to be smart, ruthless even, to get through this mess. The confrontation with her lawyer was next. Emily was trying to spin her story, paint herself as the victim, and claim she deserved everything. But I had the proof, the evidence of her affair, her secret accounts, her lies. I felt confident that I could fight for custody and keep our house. Still, I knew it wouldn't be easy. She had her own lawyer, and she was prepared to do whatever it took. All I could do now was gather every shred of proof I had and prepare for a legal battle that I knew would be ugly. The court date was set sooner than I expected, and I knew this was the moment everything would come to a head. I wasn't just fighting over money and the house anymore. This was about my children's future and whether I'd be able to hold on to what I worked so hard for. Emily was already throwing everything she had at me: lies, manipulations, even trying to spin her affair as just a mistake she was trying to fix. But I had the proof, and I was ready to use it. The morning of the hearing, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. My lawyer, Sarah, went over the strategy one. Last time, we had all the evidence: the texts, the emails, the bank statements, the offshore account records, the private investigators' reports. I knew Emily's lawyer was going to try and spin her story, make her seem like the victim, and paint me as controlling or unfit. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had the truth on my side. When we walked into the courtroom, Emily looked smug, like she thought she had already won. Her lawyer was confident too, but I kept my composure. I knew I had the evidence to back me up. The judge called the case and the hearing began. Emily's lawyer started by claiming I was paranoid, that I was trying to control her, and that I was an unfit father because I was abusive and aggressive. I couldn't believe she was stooping so low. I sat there listening to her lies, feeling my blood boil. Then I was called to testify. I laid out everything: the secret offshore accounts, the money transfers, the texts, the emails. I explained how Emily had been lying to me for years, how she was funneling our savings into her lover's account, and how she was planning to take the house from me. I could see her trying to deny everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. I could tell the judge was surprised at the depth of her deception. Emily's lawyer tried to discredit me, but I stayed firm. I told the court about her attempts to manipulate the situation, her threats, her lies. I explained how she'd been secretly preparing to run away with her lover, leaving me to pick up the pieces. As I spoke, I saw her face flicker with anger and frustration. She tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced her, asking for the evidence. When I presented the bank statements and the offshore account details, her face went pale. Then it was her turn to testify. She spun a story about how she was stressed, how she loved me, and how she made a mistake. But her words sounded hollow, rehearsed. When pressed on the offshore accounts, she tried to deny everything, claiming she had no idea how the money got there. I knew she was lying again. That's when I pulled out the emails where she admitted to her affair, the ones where she discussed her plans to leave me and take the house. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. I knew I had made my case. The evidence was overwhelming. I saw her lawyer exchanging looks with her, probably trying to figure out how to spin this, but it was clear she was on the losing side. The judge finally asked Emily directly if she had been honest with her financial disclosures. She hesitated, then broke down and admitted to the offshore accounts and the affair. That moment was a victory, small but significant. As the court adjourned, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. I knew this wasn't over yet. Emily was already planning her next move, and I had to be prepared. But for now, I had won a crucial battle. I had the judge's recognition of her lies, her betrayal, and her attempts to steal our assets. I knew I could fight her in court, and I had every intention of doing just that. In the aftermath, I started to feel the weight lift off my shoulders, even if only a little. I began to see a future where I could finally start to rebuild. I contacted my bank, secured our assets, and started to plan how to protect the house and our savings from her grasp. I also reached out to my kids, making sure they knew I was there for them, that I loved them and would do everything to keep them safe. But the emotional toll was still heavy. I was angry at Emily, furious that she could lie and manipulate her way into what she wanted, that she'd betrayed me, our family, and everything we'd built. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it sooner, how I was so blind to her true nature. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and deeply hurt. Yet, amidst all that, I also felt a flicker of hope. This was the beginning of the end of her lies, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to move on. The days after the court hearing were some of the most intense I've ever experienced. I felt a strange mix of relief, exhaustion, and annoying anxiety about what was coming next. Emily was furious, her face twisted with rage and frustration, and she made no effort to hide her contempt. She started making threats, talking about how she'd fight me over custody and the house, insisting she'd destroy me if I tried to take everything away from her. It was clear she wasn't done trying to manipulate the system or me. I knew I had to stay one step ahead. I spent hours every day working with my lawyer, Sarah, to prepare for the next phase. We filed for full custody of the kids, arguing that Emily's affair and her financial deception showed she was unfit to be their primary caregiver. We also moved to freeze her access to our assets, making sure she couldn't drain the bank accounts or transfer any more money into offshore accounts. I wasn't about to let her steal what was ours, especially after everything I'd uncovered. Meanwhile, I started working on rebuilding my emotional resilience. I reached out to friends I trusted, people who had known Emily and me for years. I needed their support, people who could vouch for my character and the fact that I was a good father. I also made a point to spend more time with my kids, to remind them that I was still here, that I loved them and would protect them from her schemes. It was hard, seeing her try to turn the kids against me, but I remained firm, consistent, and loving. Her next move was predictable. She hired her own lawyer and they filed a counterclaim for custody. She claimed she was the better mother, that I was controlling and aggressive, and that she deserved the house because she had more emotional ties to it. It was classic manipulation, but I knew her game. I had the evidence of her affair, her financial lies, and her attempts to hide assets. I also had witnesses, friends and family, who could testify to her behavior and her neglect during the time she was secretly with Mark. The custody battle was brutal. Emily used every trick in the book, emotional appeals, false accusations, even trying to paint me as an unfit parent. But I had the truth on my side, and I was determined not to let her win. I prepared for every court date, gathering more evidence, organizing my witnesses, and making sure I had a clear plan to show I was the better choice for the kids. I knew she was counting on emotional manipulation, but I refused to let her control the narrative. One particularly shocking incident happened during this period. Emily showed up unexpectedly at my house, yelling and crying, claiming she'd been forced into a corner and had no choice but to do what she did. She begged me to work things out, saying she'd change, that she loved me and that she'd stop her affair if I just forgave her. It was a classic tactic, trying to guilt-trip me into dropping the case. But I saw right through her. I told her she was manipulative, that I knew her lies, and that I wouldn't be part of her game anymore. The most infuriating part was her continued attempts to gaslight me. She kept insisting that I was overreacting, that I was jealous or paranoid, even though I had the evidence to prove otherwise. She'd call me controlling whenever I tried to set boundaries or protect our assets. I realized she was trying to turn the tables, making me look like the bad guy while she played the victim. But I refused to let her manipulate the system and the court. I knew the truth, and I was determined to fight for my kids and what was rightfully ours. Throughout all this, I stayed focused on the bigger picture. I knew this wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about my integrity and my role as a father. I wanted to ensure that Emily couldn't use her lies and manipulations to take the kids away from me or drain our savings. I also knew I had to keep my emotions in check. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I tried to remind myself that this was a war I had to win, not just for me but for my children. One thing that kept me going was thinking about the future. I imagined a life where I could finally breathe again, where I wouldn't have to wake up every day wondering if she was lying or cheating. I also started to plan how I'd rebuild my life after this. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. I wanted to be a better father, a better man, and someone who could finally move past this betrayal. The legal process dragged on, and I knew the fight wasn't over yet. But I had the evidence, the support, and the resolve to see it through. I was done being the naive husband trusting blindly. Now I was fighting for my future, my dignity, and my kids' stability. I still felt angry, so angry, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. Whatever happens next, I knew I'd come out of this stronger. I had to. The final court hearing was the culmination of everything I had been fighting for. I knew Emily was going to pull out all the stops, more lies, more manipulations. But I also knew I had the truth, the evidence, and the support. My lawyer Sarah and I had prepared meticulously. We had everything laid out, proof of her affair, her secret offshore accounts, her attempts to hide assets, and her ongoing efforts to turn the court against me. I was exhausted but determined. When we entered the courtroom, Emily looked visibly rattled. Her lawyer was trying to spin her story, claiming she was the victim of an unfaithful husband, that her affair was just a lapse, and that she deserved the house because she had more emotional ties. But I held my ground. I knew the judge saw through her facade. I could see the skepticism in the judge's eyes as I laid out the evidence explaining how Emily had been secretly funneling money into offshore accounts for years, how she had lied about her job, and how her affair with Mark was just the tip of the iceberg. As I testified, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally telling my side, presenting the truth that Emily had desperately tried to hide. When I showed the court the emails, the bank statements, and the private investigators' reports, I saw her attempt to deny everything falter. Her lawyer's objections grew weaker, and the judge's expression grew more serious. It was clear she was losing control of her narrative. Emily's lawyer then tried to argue that I was controlling and that I had manipulated her, but I countered with cold facts. I explained how she had been planning her escape for years, how she lied about her financial situation, and how her affair with Mark was a betrayal not just of me, but of our family. I emphasized that I was a devoted father, that I had always put my children's best interests first, and that her actions had endangered their stability. Finally, the judge made her ruling. She awarded me primary custody of the kids, citing Emily's infidelity and financial deception as evidence of her unfitness to be the primary caregiver. The judge also ordered Emily to pay a substantial amount of spousal support and to return the offshore funds she had hidden. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The court recognized the lies, the betrayal, and the manipulation. Justice was served. The aftermath was surreal. Emily was furious, shouting and crying as she left the courtroom, screaming about how she'd destroy me, but I felt nothing but a strange calm. I had fought hard and I had won the only thing that mattered, my children's safety and my integrity. I knew she'd try to fight me further, but I had the evidence, the court's backing, and a new resolve to rebuild my life. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing. I filed for divorce, started the process of dividing our assets, and took steps to secure our home and savings. I also made a conscious effort to be present for my kids, to rebuild their sense of stability and love. The betrayal cut deep, but I learned a lot through this ordeal about trust, deception, and resilience. Looking back, I realize I was naive for so long, trusting her blindly, but I also see that I was strong enough to fight for what's right. I've learned that betrayal can come from those closest to you, but it doesn't have to define you. You have to face the truth, gather your strength, and stand your ground. Protect your heart, your family, and your assets. Because in the end, honesty and integrity are what matter most, and those are the lessons I'll carry with me forever.